I can't believe this is happening, Claire Thompson whispered under her breath, clutching the small bottle of medication tightly as she stepped up to the pharmacy counter, her hands trembling from the weight of both worry and embarrassment. The fluorescent lights overhead felt harsher than usual, casting unforgiving shadows on her tired face and highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. At 29, Claire had long ago traded sleep for the ceaseless demands of caring for her 5-year-old son, Liam, and the endless bills that seemed to pile higher every week. Today was no different. Her checking account barely held enough to cover groceries, let alone the prescription that Liam desperately needed after his recent bout of illness. As she laid the small bottle on the counter, she counted her cash meticulously, the quarters and singles clicking against the plastic tray, each sound amplifying her anxiety. Behind her, the line of customers shifted impatiently, a few throwing glances that made her cheeks burn with shame. The young cashier, trying to mask her own discomfort, scanned the medication and hesitated. "Ma'am, you're short by $5.30, she said gently, her tone polite but firm. Claire's stomach dropped, a cold knot of panic forming as she dug frantically through her worn purse, finding only a few crumpled bills and loose coins. Her heart pounded, and she glanced around, feeling the weight of every eye on her, every second stretching like an eternity. She opened her mouth to explain, to apologize, to beg for a moment of understanding, but the words caught in her throat. Just as her vision blurred with rising tears and the first whispers of hopelessness crept in, a deep, calm voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, that won't do." Claire turned sharply, startled to see a tall man in a tailored navy suit standing just behind her. His presence was commanding yet oddly comforting, his dark gray eyes assessing the situation with a quiet authority that made her stomach flutter with nervous energy. She instinctively clutched the medication closer to her chest, unsure if she should say anything. The man's gaze softened slightly as he reached into his pocket and placed a crisp $20 bill on the counter. "Consider it taken care of," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. Claire blinked, confusion and relief warring within her as she opened her mouth, barely managing a whispered, "Thank you. I can't accept this." The man shook his head lightly, a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You need this for your son, right? Let me handle it. No explanations needed." The cashier, a little flustered but relieved, quickly completed the transaction, sliding the now-paid bottle toward Claire. She clutched it to her chest, tears threatening to spill, her body trembling not just from exhaustion, but from the sudden, unexpected kindness. As she turned to leave, the man's voice followed her, gentle but commanding. "Don't go just yet. We need to talk." Claire froze, hesitation mixing with curiosity, unsure why a stranger would care so deeply. He took a step closer, his presence impossible to ignore, and as the fluorescent lights flickered above, she realized that this was no ordinary passerby. There was a familiarity in his eyes, a certainty in his tone that made her heart skip. Claire swallowed hard, gripping the medication tighter, her mind racing with questions and a strange, cautious hope. For the first time in weeks, she felt someone see her, not the frazzled mother, not the struggling woman, but her, the real Claire, standing at the crossroads of desperation and unexpected salvation, and she couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Claire hesitated in the middle of the pharmacy, her chest rising and falling quickly as she struggled to catch her breath. She could feel the heat rising to her face, a mixture of embarrassment and lingering panic from the earlier moment. And yet beneath it all, there was a strange sense of relief that someone had stepped in when she was at her lowest. Michael Harper stood just a few steps behind, his posture relaxed but commanding, the faintest trace of a smile playing at his lips as he watched her. His presence was both comforting and intimidating, a reminder that he was a man accustomed to control and precision. Yet here he was, inserting himself into her chaotic world without ceremony. Claire turned slightly, her eyes darting around to see if anyone else was observing. But the line was shorter now. Most of the customers already moved on, leaving a quiet space filled with the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the low murmur of the air conditioning. She adjusted the straps of her worn handbag over her shoulder, glancing down at the bottle of medication in her hands, and her thoughts raced with the practical concerns she could not ignore. Liam needed this today, not tomorrow, and she had to get him home, safe and comfortable. Her hands still shook, and she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, aware of how frazzled she must appear. Michael took a step forward, his movement deliberate and unhurried, closing the distance between them just enough that she could sense the faint scent of his cologne, subtle but unmistakably expensive. "You should not have to feel this way alone," he said, his voice low but steady, carrying a weight that seemed to anchor her spinning thoughts. Claire opened her mouth to reply, but found herself momentarily speechless. The words she wanted to say tangled in the whirlwind of emotions that had engulfed her since stepping into the pharmacy. Michael glanced at the bottle in her hands, and then back at her, his gray eyes sharp but kind, assessing, almost as if he were trying to measure the burden she carried and decide how best to lighten it without making her feel exposed. "Let us make sure your son gets what he needs," he continued, producing a small leather card holder from his pocket and carefully placing it on the counter, a gesture that seemed both simple and deliberate, an offer of assistance that carried no questions, no judgment. Claire felt a lump form in her throat as she took in the gesture, her heart pounding, caught between gratitude and disbelief. She reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing against his briefly as she accepted the card, and for a moment, the hum of the pharmacy seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them suspended in the quiet tension of the encounter. She finally managed a small, shaky smile, the first sign of composure since she had arrived, and her voice trembled slightly as she said, "Thank you. I do not know how to repay you." Michael shook his head gently, a subtle warmth in his eyes softening the steely impression he naturally conveyed. "No repayment necessary," he said. "Just make sure he takes it. That is all that matters." The sincerity in his words was undeniable, and Claire felt an unfamiliar sense of safety wash over her, a feeling that had been absent from her life for months. Her mind flickered to the events that had led her here, to the endless nights worrying about bills and medications, to the solitude of parenting alone, and to the constant pressure of ensuring Liam's well-being against all odds. Michael's presence now added a new layer to her reality, one she had not anticipated, and she realized with a start that she did not want him to leave just yet. She adjusted her grip on the bottle, turning slightly to face him more fully, and for the first time in days, allowed herself a deep breath that carried both relief and the lingering spark of curiosity about the man who had intervened so quietly, yet so decisively, in her life. The sound of a cart rolling across the pharmacy floor brought her attention back to the present, but the unease mingled with hope remained, a tension that promised the unfolding of something beyond mere coincidence, as if fate had decided to intervene in the most unexpected of places, and Claire could not help but wonder what the next steps would bring as Michael's calm, watchful presence lingered behind her. Claire carefully placed the bottle of medication into the small, insulated bag she had brought for emergencies, her fingers lingering over the zipper as if the act of closing it could somehow lock away the whirlwind of emotions she felt. She could still feel Michael Harper's presence behind her, a subtle pressure that was not intrusive but impossible to ignore, and her thoughts raced as she tried to reconcile the strange combination of relief and unease that had settled over her. She glanced up briefly and caught the faintest nod from him, as if acknowledging her unspoken gratitude, and the gesture, simple as it was, sent a ripple of warmth through her chest. Claire adjusted her worn coat, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear, and forced herself to step toward the exit, each movement deliberate, aware that every step carried her further from the small bubble of security that Michael had created around her. The crisp autumn air outside the pharmacy hit her cheeks immediately, a reminder that the city had not paused for her crisis, and she shivered slightly as the wind tugged at her coat. Her mind was consumed with practical concerns, how she would get Liam home safely, how she would administer his medication on time, and how she would face the mounting bills that seemed to grow taller with each passing day. Despite the chaos, a strange sense of possibility had taken root in her thoughts, one that she had not allowed herself to entertain for months. Michael followed closely behind, his steps measured and calm, giving her space yet maintaining a presence that reassured without smothering. She found herself stealing glances at him, noticing the sharp lines of his suit, The gray flecks in his eyes that caught the late afternoon sun, and the quiet intensity in his gaze that suggested he was as used to commanding a boardroom as he was to understanding the fragility of someone in need. "Are you sure you will be all right?" he asked gently, his voice low enough to carry intimacy but firm enough to command attention. Claire hesitated, searching for words that did not betray the exhaustion and vulnerability she carried, and finally managed a nod. "Yes, I thank you. Truly." Her voice was small, but the sincerity in it was unmistakable. Michael offered a subtle, encouraging smile, the kind that suggested understanding without pressure, and Claire felt an unfamiliar yet welcome sense of ease begin to settle around her. As they approached the corner where she had parked her small, aging sedan, a sudden thought struck her. She had no idea who this man really was, yet somehow, she felt safe in his presence, as though an invisible shield had been placed around her and her son. She opened the car door and hesitated, glancing back at him. Michael simply nodded toward the seatbelt, his expression calm and expectant, and Claire realized she had a choice to make, not about accepting help for her son, but about trusting someone who had appeared in her life at precisely the right moment. With a deep breath, she guided Liam into the back seat, adjusting his jacket and making sure the straps of his car seat were secure, every movement precise despite the trembling in her hands. Michael lingered at the edge of the sidewalk, his eyes observing her attentively yet without intrusion, and Claire felt a curious mixture of gratitude and cautious curiosity toward the stranger who had seen her at her lowest and chosen to act. She slid into the driver's seat, her mind still whirling with questions and possibilities, and as she started the engine, she sensed that this day, which had begun with desperation and embarrassment, was somehow shifting, bending towards something neither entirely predictable nor entirely within her control. The traffic lights ahead reflected off the windshield, painting her dashboard in transient shades of orange and red, and Claire's thoughts wandered briefly to the small, determined face of Liam in the rearview mirror, his eyes trusting and oblivious to the quiet drama that had just unfolded around them. She exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing just a fraction, and she felt the weight of the moment, the mixture of fear, relief, and tentative hope, pressing gently but insistently on her heart, a reminder that even in the midst of struggle, unexpected kindness could appear like a lifeline when it was needed most. The city streets were bustling with the late afternoon crowd, the hum of traffic and distant sirens creating a backdrop to Claire Thompson's cautious drive home. Liam, sitting quietly in his car seat, hummed softly to himself, the small voice a gentle reminder that the medication she had secured moments ago was more than just a bottle. It was a promise of care and comfort for her son. Claire's hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual, her knuckles whitening as she maneuvered through the crowded intersections, her thoughts still returning to Michael Harper, the man who had appeared out of nowhere and transformed a moment of humiliation into one of unexpected safety. She could not help but recall the way his eyes had assessed her situation, the calm confidence in his movements, the subtle warmth in his tone that made her feel seen and valued despite the vulnerability she had displayed. The memory was disorienting in its intensity. She had lived in a world dominated by routine, exhaustion, and worry, yet suddenly, a stranger had entered that world and offered more than a fleeting act of kindness. As she turned onto a quieter residential street, Claire's mind wandered to the small apartment she shared with Liam, a space that had become both sanctuary and prison, filled with the evidence of everyday struggle, scattered toys, unpaid bills, and the constant hum of worry that never seemed to abate. The weight of her responsibilities pressed down on her shoulders, and she exhaled slowly, feeling a mix of relief and lingering anxiety that made her chest tighten. Michael's presence lingered in her thoughts like a shadow she could not shake, a figure both formidable and unexpectedly gentle, who had intervened without ceremony and without expectation of repayment. Claire adjusted the rearview mirror to check on Liam, who was now leaning slightly forward, curious and alert, his small hands gripping the edge of the car seat. She smiled faintly, the sight of his bright eyes and soft features a grounding reminder of why she fought through each day, why every hardship mattered, and why moments like this, however brief, carried the power to shift her perspective entirely. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden hue over the rooftops and turning the cityscape into a landscape of warmth and fleeting shadows. Claire navigated the final stretch toward their apartment, her mind racing with possibilities and questions about the man who had helped her, about the manner in which fate had placed him in her path, and about the unexpected sense of hope that had taken root despite weeks of struggle. She parked the car, carefully securing Liam's seatbelt before sliding the door open and letting him out, his small feet padding against the pavement as they walked toward the building. Claire balanced the medication bag with one hand and gently guided him with the other, each step deliberate, aware of the vulnerability that came with stepping out into the world, yet strengthened by the knowledge that she had not faced it entirely alone. The building lobby was quiet, a contrast to the chaos of the streets, and as she entered the elevator, the familiar hum and soft lights offered a fleeting sense of normalcy. Her thoughts lingered on Michael Harper, the stranger whose actions had rewritten the narrative of her day, and Claire felt a cautious anticipation, a quiet understanding that this encounter might be the beginning of something far more significant than a simple act of generosity. She exhaled again, steadying herself, as she reached for the button to her floor, the elevator rising smoothly, each passing level marking not only the physical ascent, but the gradual shift in her own sense of possibility, the first faint light of hope breaking through the fatigue that had defined so many of her recent days. The moment the elevator doors opened, Claire felt a surge of determination. She guided Liam carefully down the hallway of their apartment building, his small hand gripping hers as they moved. The weight of the medication bag in her other hand reminded her that today had been more than just a routine trip. It had been a challenge she had not anticipated and a moment of intervention she would not soon forget. As they approached their apartment door, Claire placed the keys in the lock, her mind racing through the events that had unfolded since she had left the pharmacy. Michael Harper had remained with her in some way, a silent observer whose presence had both unsettled and reassured her. The memory of his eyes, sharp yet warm, stayed with her, and she realized that a stranger had seen her struggle and chosen to act without judgment, without expectation, and in a manner that had restored a fraction of her confidence. Inside the apartment, the familiar scent of home greeted her, a mixture of Liam's laundry, the faint aroma of dinner still cooling on the counter, and the soft hum of the heater working quietly to ward off the chill from the late autumn evening. She helped Liam out of his coat, adjusting his small sleeves and brushing stray strands of hair from his forehead, and set the medication carefully on the kitchen counter within easy reach. His eyes looked up at her, bright and trusting, and Claire felt the tension of the day begin to ease just slightly, replaced by the ever-present undercurrent of responsibility that had defined her life for the past several years. She moved quickly to prepare a small snack for him, the routine movements grounding her after the whirlwind of uncertainty that had started in the pharmacy. Every gesture was deliberate, every small action a reminder that she was capable of managing the challenges that life had placed before her, even when the world outside seemed to conspire against her. The soft ding of her phone broke the quiet moment, and Claire's heart skipped as she saw an unfamiliar number light up the screen. She hesitated, glancing at Liam as he nibbled on his snack, and then answered, her voice steady despite the rapid beat of her heart. On the other end, the voice was calm, confident, and unmistakably attentive, asking if she had arrived home safely and if Liam had taken his medication. Claire's lips parted slightly, caught off guard by the thoughtfulness and the concern, and she found herself responding with more ease than she expected, describing briefly how Liam had settled and how the medication was secured. The conversation was brief but carried an undeniable warmth, a bridge between the chaos she had endured and the sense of security she now felt. She ended the call with a quiet nod, placing her phone gently on the counter, and realized that the day had shifted in ways she had not anticipated. Michael Harper had entered her life at precisely the right moment, offering help without intrusion, and in doing so had created a space where hope could quietly take root. Claire sat down for a moment, watching Liam finish his snack, and felt the first stirrings of a possibility she had not allowed herself to consider. That even amidst exhaustion, struggle, and the relentless demands of a single parent, moments of unexpected kindness could illuminate a path forward, and that the presence of someone who truly understood the weight she carried might not be as impossible as she had believed. Claire sat on the edge of her couch, Liam playing quietly on the carpet with his small collection of toys, and felt the residual tension from the day slowly ebbing away. The events at the pharmacy, the intervention, and the unexpected support from Michael Harper had left her mind racing, a mix of relief, curiosity, and the faintest whisper of hope intertwining in her thoughts. She watched Liam carefully, making sure he was settled, his small hands methodically stacking blocks in a pattern only he understood, and a soft smile tugged at her lips despite the exhaustion that clung to her shoulders. The apartment was quiet now, the hum of the heater and the occasional distant sound of the city filtering through the windows creating a serene backdrop. Her phone lay on the coffee table, face up, the memory of his voice still lingering in her ears, the calm authority and warmth leaving a mark that she could not ignore. She picked it up almost instinctively, her fingers hovering over the screen, reluctant to dial but unable to resist the pull of curiosity that had grown stronger with each hour. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the call button, and when he answered, his voice was calm, steady, and filled with the same quiet authority she remembered from the pharmacy. Yet there was an added layer of attentiveness that made her heart flutter. They spoke in measured sentences, Michael inquiring gently about Liam, about the medication, about her evening plans, and Claire responding with the honest simplicity that had become her shield, carefully measuring each word while simultaneously feeling a sense of connection that was both surprising and reassuring. He asked if she needed any further assistance, not intruding, not prying, but offering a presence she had not realized she craved, and Claire felt herself responding more freely than she expected, describing briefly the little victories of the evening, the moments when Liam had laughed, the small triumphs that made her feel competent and strong despite the overwhelming demands of the day. Their conversation wove a quiet thread between them, one that seemed to bridge the gap of strangers and acquaintances into something more tentative, yet undeniably present. When she finally ended the call, Claire placed the phone down and exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, replaced by a sense of calm determination. She looked at Liam, who was now leaning back with a satisfied sigh, and felt a protective warmth flood her chest, a reminder of why she endured, why she persevered, and why moments of unexpected kindness could resonate so profoundly. The city outside began to settle into the quiet rhythm of evening, lights twinkling faintly through the windows, and Claire allowed herself to sit back, absorbing the events of the day and the subtle shift in her perception. The intervention had not solved all her problems, and the challenges of tomorrow loomed large. Yet for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of reassurance, a gentle thread of possibility weaving its way through the fatigue, connecting her present struggle with the quiet hope that support could appear in the most unexpected forms, and that even amidst exhaustion, there were moments where trust, care, and quiet attention could begin to change the course of a day, a life, and perhaps, in time, her understanding of the world around her. The next morning, Claire woke to the soft light filtering through the blinds, casting a gentle glow across the small living room where Liam was already busy stacking his toy cars in neat lines across the carpet. The events of the previous day felt both vivid and surreal, the memory of Michael Harper's unexpected intervention at the pharmacy still lingering like a gentle echo in her mind. She brewed a pot of coffee, the aroma filling the apartment and providing a sense of normalcy, and sat at the kitchen table, watching Liam carefully, making sure he was engaged and safe as he played. Her thoughts wandered to the conversation she had shared with Michael the night before, the way his voice had conveyed concern without overstepping, the quiet attentiveness that had offered reassurance without intrusion. It was a strange and unfamiliar feeling, one she had not allowed herself in many months, to be seen, acknowledged, and supported without judgment. As she poured a cup of coffee and sipped it slowly, Claire reflected on the practical realities she faced, how she would manage work, childcare, and the constant bills. But for the first time, the day ahead seemed slightly less daunting, colored with the possibility of unexpected assistance. The apartment door opened briefly as a neighbor passed by, and the mundane sounds of life, footsteps, distant conversation, and the hum of the city outside reminded her that the world continued even amid her personal struggles. Claire leaned back in her chair, the warmth of the coffee and the soft morning light grounding her, and allowed herself a moment to consider that perhaps the intervention she had experienced was not simply a coincidence, that there was a pattern of care and attentiveness in the world she had grown too weary to notice. Her phone buzzed gently on the counter, drawing her attention, and she saw a message from an unknown number, a simple line asking if she and Liam were safe and if the medication had been administered. Her heart skipped, and she typed a brief, polite response, explaining that they were well and that Liam had taken his dose without issue. The reply came almost immediately, offering reassurance and suggesting that if she needed further assistance, she should not hesitate to reach out. Claire stared at the message, a mixture of curiosity, gratitude, and cautious hope stirring within her, recognizing the tone and care in the words as coming from the same man who had helped her the day before. Liam's laughter broke through her thoughts as he called her over to look at his carefully arranged cars, and she allowed herself a genuine smile, the kind that reached her eyes and warmed her chest. The morning unfolded in a rhythm that felt both ordinary and infused with a subtle sense of promise. Breakfast was prepared, toys were organized, and small tasks accomplished, each action carrying with it the quiet momentum of a day that might finally bend in her favor. As she settled Liam at the table with a snack, Claire's mind lingered on the idea that support could arrive in the most unexpected forms, and that moments of kindness, attentiveness, and consideration might have the power to change not only a day but the trajectory of her life. The city outside glowed with the promise of a new day, and Claire felt a tentative sense of reassurance, knowing that the past hours had offered more than just immediate relief. They had offered a glimpse of possibility, a subtle indication that the challenges she faced could be met with both courage and unexpected assistance, and that the day ahead, though filled with responsibilities, might also hold the potential for connection, understanding, and quiet hope that could carry her and Liam through whatever came next.